In this new video, I'm going to explain how a pseudo-clinical trial in Uganda appeared to show 154 people being cured from malaria, and how those involved designed an experiment to get the results that they wanted, and how one of them didn't just do this once, but twice. I have to admit, I was really struggling to understand what was happening back in 2012. This is because the only information I had to go on was from the video, leaked proof the Red Cross cured 154 malarial cases with MMS. The video and the people who promote it would have you believe that this research is being suppressed by the powers that be. But in reality, the only people who are suppressing this research are the people involved. As I've said previously, this trial was privately funded by a chap named Klaus, who referred to it as his own private research. Now, he is one of the people who are preventing this data from being released, and he's the person who wouldn't give me access to the raw footage or answer basic questions on the trial. The second person is Leo, who stole the footage from Klaus and then got someone to upload it to YouTube. This is the same Leo, by the way, who translated several books by the guy who coined the term MMS, Jim Humble.
People are worried about chemtrails and morgellons. Have you dealt with that, and is MMS helping there also?
Taking MMS every day can help with all of the poisons that they're putting into our environment. We're getting poisons from a lot of different ways, from the chemtrails, from what's in our water, to even, for example, pasteurization of milk.
Leo 100% believes in MMS's magical ability to cure everything, including malaria. There is no good reason for him to not release the raw data, other than he knows that people like me will rip it a new one. Now, whilst doing my research, I came across another video showing the same fake pseudo-clinical trial, or at least that's what I thought. It was shot in the same place, had the same MMS, had the same experiment, and even had some of the same people. And it too claimed to have cured 154 people of malaria. But then it was pointed out to me by the editor of the first video that this actually was a completely different experiment. You see, after the first experiment, Leo went off to do his own pseudo-clinical medical trial in Uganda, which is practically identical to the first one, right down to it being recorded and uploaded to YouTube. It also cured the magical number of 154 people. The only difference is, in this second video, there's a lot more information about what actually went on, so we can have a clearer picture of what actually happened back in 2012. According to the narrator of the second video, the people who took part in the trials were suffering from health problems and heard about it on local radio. When they first arrived, they were registered and then underwent an initial examination.
Before test subjects were treated, their name and other data were carefully documented on paper and also logged in the computer. They then received an initial examination by the doctor to determine their symptoms and record the diagnosis on their patient form.
Next, everyone was given an antigen-based rapid test.
Each subject was given a malaria test that quickly revealed whether they were infected with the disease.
Next, it's possible that some had a second rapid test using a different brand. This second test actually tested for the same malarial parasite. However, according to the narrator, it was being used to determine if someone's infected with more than one strain of malaria, which it physically can't do.
In this example, you see two red lines. This means the test subject is suffering from two different strains of malaria.
Those who tested negative were sent to a nurse to talk more about their illnesses, and for some bizarre reason, also given MMS. Next, those who tested positive using the blood smear were sent to the lab for a quick strip test on the same day.
Those subjects who test positive for malaria are sent to the lab, where they receive a second blood test to count the number of malarial parasites under the microscope and thereby determine how sick the patient is.
Next, they were given MMS and a mosquito net and told to return the next day. When they did, they were tested using the blood smear method, and they found in the first video all but one of them were cured, and in the second video all but 11 people were cured. So there we have it, day 1 test 1, antigen-based rapid test. And there is a slight possibility that some people had a second rapid test. Then on the same day we have test 2, which is a blood smear, And on the second day we have the third test, which is also a blood smear. So what really happened then? They thought all the positive results they got from the antigen-based rapid tests in this malaria endemic area were accurate. As I previously discussed, these tests only detect the presence of a protein excreted by one of the malarial parasites. This protein can actually hang around in the body for a while after the parasite has been eliminated or its numbers greatly reduced. This would give a false positive. Put simply, these tests should only be used for screening, and any positive should be backed up with a separate, different test. They then gave them MMS and a mosquito net and told them to return the next day. I'm sure some of you have noticed there's something missing here, but anyway, let's continue. The next day they came in and they were tested for malaria using a different method. They were tested using the blood smear method. And they found out that the vast majority of people who tested positive the previous day were actually false positives. This is because they were well below the threshold to be counted as malarial positive using this method. But they misaccredited this drop in people testing positive for malaria to the MMS they were given between tests. With regards to the middle test that apparently was performed directly after the quick strip test on the first day and before the test on the second day, I can think of two explanations. The first explanation is it didn't exist, and these people are lying to us. Would this really be that surprising? In my previous video I've showed you guys how they contradict each other all the time. And for those of you who are not convinced, I want you to have a look at this. This is the test results of a child who tested positive on the first day and on the second day. The odd thing here is that this is never mentioned by Klaus. He just says only one person tested positive on the second day and it was some old bloke.
The next day, early in the morning, I think when we arrived at the hospital that we identified, there must have been like 200 fresh new patients already, together with the 5 from the previous day. From the 5 from the previous day, 4 were identified malaria negative, 1 still had malaria parasites, and that's probably a personal matter because this guy, his name was Isaac, was in such a bad shape that I said just give him the half dose. Isaac was given a full dosage. He came back the next day, being the 17th of December. Well enough, also Isaac was cleared of malaria.
It could be, however, the reason why she tested positive on the second day was because she was tested using the rapid test and not the blood smear test. It's interesting that, isn't it? I think, in all likelihood, there never was a middle test, and they simply put it in post, in the editing room. Now this would be ridiculously easy to do, and it's backed up by the fact that there's no mention of any false positives from the rapid test. Also, there was no mention of this second middle test, this test 2, on any of the paperwork. But perhaps the best piece of evidence we have to prove that there wasn't actually a middle test comes from the draft project description that Penji van Ruberb obtained from the guy Leo gave the video to upload to YouTube. I realise this is a draft, so take it with a pinch of salt, but it quite clearly says that only 2 tests were ever to be performed. So this was actually produced about a month before the experiment took place, and I don't think that it could have changed that much in such a short amount of time. It also says that these people were only to be given 18 drops of MMS, but we'll get into that bit later. The second explanation is my own theory that I've come to after looking at the footage from the second video. Now in this video, as I've said, they go into a little bit more detail, and they say basically that this middle test was being used to quantify the amount of MMS to give to a person, and not being used to detect any false positives. So just to clarify, the first test, the rapid test, is still being used to determine if someone's malarial positive or not, and this middle test, if it exists or not, is being used to quantify the amount of MMS to give to the person. What's the evidence for this, I hear you cry? Well, perhaps the most damning piece of evidence comes after this clip here, where the narrator tells us that the labs were keeping their own record of the results.
Those subjects who test positive for malaria are sent to the lab, where they receive a second blood test to count the number of malarial parasites under the microscope and thereby determine how sick the patient is. The lab kept a separate record book that will be used to evaluate the subsequent results.
As he's saying this, the camera zooms towards the results of 4 people. Now these 4 people all tested positive previously using the rapid strip tests. So what does it say? Well, it's kind of hard to see because the handwriting is so terrible. In fact, it's so bad I had to ask the fine people of Facebook land to help me out. And thank you very much guys, you people are awesome. It says, no MPS seen. No malarial parasites seen. These people will be part of the 42% of Ugandans who are host to the parasites, but their immune system keeps it in check, so they're not really that ill. There is no mention of these people in any of the videos whose parasite levels were below the threshold on the first day. So at this point, even though these people were tested with this middle test, if it exists or not, they were still treated as if they were malarial positive and given MMS. I also think it's very telling that they wrote the word seen essentially twice. I mean, do these people really know what they're doing? Or maybe I'm just looking too much into this. Further evidence for this can be seen in the video where a patient's paperwork can be seen and it says that this person was only given 4 drops of MMS. This goes against everything Klaus said, everything the narrator said, everything Leo said. In fact, this isn't even this Isaac character, because Isaac should have had 9 drops if he exists and not 4. It also goes against the draft project description that Penja managed to obtain from the guy who uploaded the original video to YouTube. Now, interesting thing about this guy, he actually wrote a book on MMS, where on the front cover, he gets the structure of MMS wrong. I mean, God, that is such a bad fail. You can't even make this up, can you? You can't make this up. Now, according to the video, the amount of MMS you were given depends on your age and your malarial status. If you're malarial positive and you're an adult, you got 18 drops, where if you're a child, you only got 8 drops. And this was in half a cup of water. Now, if you tested negative, you were given 8 drops if you're an adult and 2 drops if you're a child. Now, I can't stress enough how gross this stuff is. I've tested it myself. I say tested, I've tried it myself, and I really wasn't ready for how overpowering this stuff was. Now, a lot of people have said that I hammed it up in my video. I can tell you, God's honest truth, no, I didn't. I just didn't expect it to be so foul tasting. Chin chin. No. Now, before I go any further, I just want to pause the video a second to bring attention to a comment that I've got. Now, this comment was left on my website, and it's by a guy who's claiming to be one of my subscribers. Now, I get this all the time where some wanker claims to be one of my subscribers, but they're so disappointed in me, they just had to unsubscribe, they just had to contact me. Now, this guy is saying that I made my MMS solution too concentrated because I put 4 drops of the stuff in, 4 drops of the activator in about 200 mils of water. These people in Uganda had about, 400 mils of water, and some of them were drinking 18 drops. And apparently I made it too concentrated. So that's how they did it. They designed an experiment where all the false positives that should have been detected on the first day were actually detected on the second day, and instead of saying, hey, these are all false positives, they actually said, hey, we cured all these people of malaria. Now, as you can imagine, if you go to a place where malaria is quite prevalent, you are going to come across people who are actually infected with the parasites and who are actually very ill. Now, we actually hear about these people in the 2 videos. Now, in the first video, it's only one person, this Isaac person, who apparently tested positive on the second day, but after being given more MMS on the 3rd day, he was totally fine, but we never see any evidence whatsoever of this. And in the second video, it's 11 people who still tested positive for malaria on the 2nd day. Now, we're simply told by the narrator that these people were cured, but we're never actually shown any evidence. No paperwork from any of these people. We're not even shown any interviews of people where they said, hey, 11 people were cured. Instead, we're shown this.
The 11 subjects that still tested positive for malaria on the follow-up day had either not taken the complete treatment dose of MMS or spit it out, so the dose was too low to kill the malaria parasite. These subjects were given a second dose of MMS and carefully watched to ensure they took the complete dose. A subsequent follow-up test showed that they too were now malaria-free. The senior doctor provided us with comprehensive results at the completion of the project.
781 patients tested, 154 have malaria, 143 are okay, 11 not okay due to too few drops.
So are you happy with the results, doctor?
Very happy.
There is no evidence whatsoever that these 11 people in the second video or one person in the original video were cured of malaria on the third day. No evidence whatsoever. And what's really interesting, what's really weird, is that in the second video there's been an audio edit, a very clear one, where Leo's audio has been put over the top of something.
Due to too few drops.
So are you happy with the results, doctor?
Very happy.
Now this I found really interesting, and I may have an explanation, but it's just a bit of speculation really. I think Leo put his audio in post to change how he was referring to this chap, and make him sound as if he is a doctor. I don't think this chap is a doctor. But let's just say, you know what, maybe these guys are correct. Maybe it's Bizarro Land or Opposite Day, and MMS can indeed cure people of malaria. Okay, fair enough. It would still be wrong of the people involved to say that these people are malarial negative after only 1 day and 1 test. The malarial parasites can hide in the liver, so you need multiple days of testing negative to say conclusively that you are malarial negative. Also, if this stuff was magic and it did manage to kill all these malarial parasites, then these people should have bits of malarial parasites still floating around their system, and they should be really quite ill, but they're not. In fact, they're pretty good. It's been just over 4 years since this pseudo-clinical trial took place, where people went to Uganda and treated these human beings as if they were guinea pigs to test their quackery on. Now, I know the organisations involved, the Red Cross and the Water Reference Centre, have said, hey, whoa, this had nothing to do with us. But the fact of the matter is, they have representatives there. They have people wearing their t-shirts. They have their logo on everything. And every day they don't publicly state why that's the case, why they actually have people who work for them there, and I track these people down, then this video is going to be looked at as if it's legit. They need to publicly say why they were there, and every day they don't do that, more and more people are going to fall for this quackery. At the end of the day, just like we know every perpetual motion device is fake without looking into it, we know there is no possible way that MMS can cure people of malaria. Yes, we might come across an incredible discovery in the future that changes the way that we look at the world, but we're not going to wake up one day and realise that the Earth is cube-shaped. There is no possible way for MMS to cure malaria, and unlike most other snake oil out there on the market, this stuff poses a real threat. That's because it's a bleach, it's a harsh chemical, and it will react with whatever it comes into contact with. With the people involved being reluctant to release any more information, we may never know what really happened back in 2012. But I think I've clearly shown in these videos that these trials are not to be trusted, and that they are so fundamentally flawed. I mean, for goodness sake, they never even had a reference group. Everyone was given MMS. Doesn't matter if they were ill or not, they were given MMS. It's absolutely ridiculous, and I can't be the only one who is surprised that the people involved aren't facing any jail time. What's really disturbing and really took me off guard is that this isn't new. This isn't novel. People have been doing this for years. People have been going to malaria endemic areas, testing the population with quick strip tests, telling them that they are host to the parasites, and then giving them bleach. This is nothing new, and there are bugger tons of examples on YouTube alone of this happening. To anyone out there who's thinking of trying this stuff, please don't. I know it's really tempting to think that this stuff can cure you or maybe help the loved one, but it can't. It just can't. The people who are pushing it are idiots, liars, and con men, and they have their sight set on the most vulnerable. Don't fall for it.